Hello, ladies and gents. I hope you had a fantastic day, evening, or night, wherever you are. And this week I was given the wonderful opportunity to be able to talk to Caleb Nelson. Now, Caleb runs a coaching company called The Naked Sunday over in the US of A. And it was a great conversation because his story into business is really, really interesting. And obviously, with a name like that, you would kind of expect it to be, I would hope. So I hope you're going to take value from this conversation. And if you did, I'd love to hear what you think in the comment section down below. And I'll be back very, very soon with some brand new content. But I'm now going to hand over to Caleb to talk a little bit more about where his business came.
Hi, I'm Caleb Nelson. I own a company called Naked Sunday, and I like to say I help people look better naked. So, helping people transform their lives, feel better in their bodies, but also feel more connected and love what they see on the inside as well, and love themselves on the inside. Because what I've learned along the way, if you do not transform the inside, doesn't matter what you do to the outside, it comes back to square one. So, that's been my lifelong journey, and putting some smiles on faces is what I like to do.
Fantastic. And, thank you for the time. And I really appreciate you coming on and, taking this time to talk to the audience and come on the podcast specifically. But I think I really want to start and jump into sort of like, how did you kind of come up with the business name, right? Because it's quite a unique name. So I think let's explore that story a little bit, and I think it would be great to sort of hear, because everyone, when they come up with branding and when they think of branding, they're thinking like, oh, what should I name it, right? Like, was there a specific moment or a specific element of like what you were doing at that time in your life that would really triggered you to start the business, or like actually think, okay, I need to do something for myself, and then also then potentially led on to the name as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's actually based off an exact exercise that I did to more or less solve that problem for myself. And as they say, like once you've solved that problem for you, you want to go back and you want to teach it to others. And many times in my life, I found myself just shining the shell, thinking that that external validation was going to solve the problem. So the habit in and of itself was just sitting, much like the name says, butt naked on a Sunday all day long, and just dealing with what comes up. I wish I could have said there was like some exact like deep systemized structured process around that while that was happening. Of course, that was my journey to figure that out, and then hopefully now make it easier for people to walk through those steps, make it a little less daunting, because that abstract unknown can be a little bit scary for most. It also became a means for me to deepen my relationship with my wife. The conversations we had strengthened our relationship because we did the exercise together, which from a surface level motivation, she actually was the one who first suggested, or she heard about it. I've told this a few times, but she heard about it. I think Christina Aguilera and her husband were doing that. So when I heard that, like, what husband doesn't want to, like, oh, my wife wants to hang out with me naked on a Sunday. Yeah, I see where this is going to go. So again, leading with a little bit of like, oh, this is going to be just fun. Uh, as many things tend to go in my relationship, I decided I'm just going to go off and do this by myself first. Not because I didn't want her to be doing that, just because she decided she wasn't going to do that right away. And I actually find that to be a deep source of gratitude for myself, because just sitting there quietly and being exposed at this time, I should also mention functionally, this process also helped me lose 40 pounds. And this came at a time I owned a gym for about 10 years, wellness center, whatever you call it. It's called Purebred Athletics. And I was not living in alignment with what I was more or less preaching of taking care of my body. I didn't feel good in my body. I felt overwhelmed by stress of managing a business and you name it, building a life, building a relationship at an interesting crossroads in my life. And here I was just not happy with what I saw in front of me. And to give you reference, probably 5 years, 6 years before that, I sat butt naked in a hot tub and sold a membership to somebody at my first job just because I just didn't care, just ripped to the nines, all that stuff, but also massively insecure because all I cared about was that surface level validation. This process challenged me to go much deeper, challenged me to look at my values, look at the relationships in my life, and really ask, what do I want for myself? What do I want for the future? What do I want business? What do I want my family to be? And what are all the things that I care about? And how am I embodying those beliefs, whether it was hypocritical at that moment, which it was, to where it became where I started to slowly realign those things. And yeah, it was a hell of a journey. So it didn't hurt the fact that I'm well aware that you say naked Sunday to people, it kind of turns some heads and all that. It happened to end up being a catchy tagline as well. So it was convenient from a marketing perspective as well.
I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot to unpack there, and thank you for sharing that, because I think it's really important. Firstly, to establish that some people, especially when they're in business or even just people in general, right? We look for outside of validation from someone else, or from, especially you see it a lot in the dating scene, when like, oh, I need this validation from this girl that I like because that makes me feel more a man, or I need, or vice versa, right? And I think for me anyway, something that I really started working on about a year ago was like, okay, well, why? Right? So, I mean, let's delve into that a little bit. I mean, for people who are maybe listening and thinking, okay, well, yeah, that's me, right? How did you sort of go through that process psychologically, or like within your own mind, to be in the position to say, actually, why do I need this like external validation? Like, why am I not good enough? Why do I personally feel like I'm not good enough? Right? Like, for you personally, how did you sort of, because I think that's really hard, right? That's really hard to sort of ask yourself those difficult questions sometimes.
Yeah. What I started to explore was a lot of my upbringing, if I think about some of the roots of it. And I should also say I'm very grateful for everything I'm about to say right now. So there's no blame, anger, resentment, anything like that. I think a lot of people get really caught up like, oh, my inner child, and like, and they just keep blaming their past as opposed to being thankful for it because it laid a foundation for it. But for me, in my life, I grew up in what many would call a cult. And within those strict, rigid, right, wrong, good, bad dogmas, that the more I talk about it, it seems like everybody comes out of the word work. I've kind of loosely joked that there's just a cult of humanity. We've all got our own rigid dogmas that are keeping us within our feelings of safety. But there's really, there's no one way. There is many ways. But for me, when I looked back, the only times that I ever felt like I was most like myself, I was really taking care of myself. I was really attached to athletics. And I realized the further I strayed from respecting and taking care of my body, the further I felt from being grounded and being able to take the next steps. So, perfect example, in high school, I trained really hard. I liked athletics. That was the only time where I was able to connect with people that I could hang. I could feel like I belonged. I went to public school, but I was part of this other like religious community that just I didn't really agree with, and I didn't really have a voice for myself. A lot of times the idea of vanity and looking good or whatever that means was more or less frowned upon. From specifically, I think about this with my mother. Um, but as I got to the end of high school and I look at the moment I was 17, I decided, hey, I'm telling my parents, hey, I don't agree with this. I'm going to go my own direction. I realized if I didn't feel confident enough in myself physically and that was what I knew at the time, I don't think I would have had the strength to be able to go and say, hey, I disagree with this. I had not been able to observe from a lens where I wasn't cloudy in my own body and cloudy in my own mind. And I wouldn't have been able to check in with my heart and say something doesn't line up here. That happened several times throughout my 20s as well. I had a business fallout. I got dropped like a bad habit in several relationships. Plenty of those things happened. Failures in business, this and that. But at that moment, I think that what was really calling me, to come back to the more or less the root of your question, what was really calling me was I just didn't feel good. And I think I got out of the shower one day. I just looked at myself in the mirror. I was like, I don't even recognize you. I don't recognize the guy looking back at me. And I'm hypercritical. And I also have the lens of, I have a lot of eyeballs on me. I have people that are following me. I think it's actually a beautiful gift that I had staff and clients that I was responsible to. And not only that, my wife and I had open discussions about, well, what do we want for a family? So I thought about the weight of, what is it going to mean to be a good leader to my children? To me, and I heard this quote long ago from a coach, and it's also in a book. I can't can't remember it off the top of my head right now, so forgive me for not knowing where to reference it from, but it was all, responsibility breeds empowerment. And I think that gift of having all this responsibility in my life of financial obligations, human obligations, future obligations, pushed me to a place where I had to stare at the man in the mirror. I also had a few years before that, my dad almost died. So that also put things like, oh, this isn't, there's a timeline on some of this stuff and you don't know when it's going to end. And if you want to fulfill the things you say you want in your life, you better check yourself. So I think that stack of impetus and stack of influence, when that opportunity presented itself, I think that's why for me, and again, hindsight's 2020, I don't know. In the moment, I just felt like, yeah, let's go do it. But that triggered to say, yeah, I think it's time for me to go on this journey and take care of myself, and to be I had to set some boundaries and be a little selfish to say, I need to protect this and I need to learn how to respect this. It was time for that to take place. But as I look back, yeah, those are some of the experiences that I think were pervasive throughout, that were really influencing what was challenging me to look for external validation. I was looking for it in everything, mind you. Like I told my parents, so to give anybody scope of what one of the fundamental things that really affected me from the church stuff was there was arranged marriages and there was no dating. I'm just giving like surface level brief overview here, but the idea of you can't find love the way you need to, or find like there's a right way and a wrong way, really bothered me. And fairly aggressive fallout didn't lead to anything great. And I realized my pursuits after that was a lot of times just saying like, screw you, I'm going to show you otherwise. So I wanted to have like that super hot blonde Barbie fit chick as my arm candy or whatever. I wanted to have the business with my name and I'm the title of this and I can take my shirt off and I look like that. And I had all those things. And I didn't realize by just pursuing those out of this, when I really look at it like hate and malice and anger, I felt very hollow and very shallow at that peak. It didn't give me any satisfaction. And as I started to deconstruct that, I was like, I can't do that again. And it took me a long time to realize that those things are not bad things. To have an attractive significant other is cool, but you need to make sure that there's the soul within that as well. It needs to line up with your values. It's cool to have a successful business that makes plenty of money and you can step into that title of owner or leader or whatever it is, but you need to make sure it's built on a foundation of substance. It took a long time to unwind that. But I'd realized that a lot of it, the prior stuff was fueled from anger, resentment, scarcity, not feeling like I'm enough, and just feeling rejected. I felt alone in most of my life. And that was my way to go try to solve my own problem, surround myself with a bunch of people who think I'm important, and I felt even less important. So I apologize if I went 9 directions there because I can skate around a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. It's great because I didn't want to interrupt you because it was really important what you were saying. And I think it tells a really important story, right? And I think there's so much of our lives that we talk about this in business all the time. Do you have an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset, right? And there's lots of directions I can go with here, but just to weigh in a little bit on the similar conversation, for me on my own journey, I was in a similar boat like about 2 years ago, where it was like, actually, well, why are you doing things or making things to be perceived to be doing them, right? Are you doing them for you or are you doing them for the reaction from others, right? And I think sometimes so much of our lives, because we are a social media company, we're on social media a lot, we have a lot of these like brand building or egotistical building things that are like, okay, I want this endorphin hit because it's a good idea, right? Or I'm going to put this post up because I look ripped and all these guys and all these girls are going to be like, yeah, bro, or yeah, wow, you look amazing. Oh my God, you look really hot, etc. But I think some of the time we look too surface level at stuff. And I think it can be really challenging or really concerning or really worrying for someone to look past that sometimes from themselves, right? And I think it takes a lot of mental strength and mental capacity to be able to do that. But I think it's a very important decision to make, and something that I'm very fortunate with is I have been able to go through this process very early, and I know we don't know each other very much, but that's part of the reason why I kind of kept it this way, because it's fun to explore on the podcast. but for me, because I'm still in my early 20s, and I've just turned 25. I'm very fortunate that I've been able to make these decisions now, and been able to grow, and being able to like sort of feel out this way now, because the average is you don't do this until you're like 35, 40, right? And I think the crux of the point here for the listener is going to be question why if you do see yourself in this kind of, the picture we're painting here, question why do you need the external validation, right? Why? What about your own core? What about you? What's making you feel bad? Why are you looking for that, right? And I think it's been really interesting since, my coach and I have discussed this a lot about how and why we go about creating kind of and focusing on ourselves, and being in the position where we're not 100% sure how and why, we're just going to focus on ourselves, right? And we're in a position where we do so many things just for that external validation that we were just discussing. And I think it's, you'll get everything you want once you don't do it for someone else, is the crux of the point I'm making here, right? And I think it's all very well and good me sitting here saying that, but how have you sort of, was there like a moment, or is there a set of disciplines or a set of attitudes or a set of habits that you built in to kind of, I don't want to use the word force, but push yourself? Because sometimes I think when we have these journeys, it's very good for a couple of weeks or a month or 2 or 3 or 4. But how do you keep yourself consistent in focusing on you, right? Because it's really easy to have the distraction of, obviously you're married, so maybe it's different, but like there's still going to be distractions of like, oh, what if I do this business, or etc. Or for me as single, or what if I pursue this person, or what if I try and make this person, or try and build a relationship with this person, or etc. I mean, how do you kind of hold yourself to account, or maybe don't? I mean, do you? I mean, is there like a specific, as I say, a specific set of habits or etc.?
Well, you brought up my wife. That's one of the key things. I'm a big believer in the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I I wrote about this recently. I officiated my youngest brother's wedding, and my speech, I titled it "The Window in the Mirror." I think we don't take advantage of the opportunity to look at the people we're surrounding ourselves, because not only are they showing themselves in that moment, but it's also showing you what you value, what you are tolerating, what you are more or less promoting by proxy, by those energies staying in your life. um and I noticed that, and I'll get to my habit in a second, but uh I had a staff meeting at the gym with the whole staff. We have massage therapists and coaches and whatnot. And I looked around, and my friend and business partner was running the meeting. I just sat back and I just looked at everybody, and all of a sudden I felt like I don't know, just bizarre moments. I just looked at each person. I'm like, oh, you're that part of me. Oh, you're that part of me. Oh, you're that part of me. And I just went down the line with everybody. And I hadn't noticed that before. It makes sense because I chose those people to come into my life because I wanted them to be part of the business. So of course it was going to be expressed. Now, was there things that I did not like? Was there things that I did like? Yes. So that empathy right there became really powerful. I personally am not a systems guy. It's just not, like, the how of stuff is not a thing. There's a book called Who Not How. That is me to a T. I am about the people, and the people have always given me the answer. I just usually had to get out of my own way and listen to what the hell was being told to me. So that's my habit. I tend to be very introspective, and it took me a long time. So if there is a habit to say, I think Naked Sunday was the best habit, the best process of that. But the idea behind Naked Sunday is to make space for your own thoughts. Most people fill their life up with busyness, and the distractions prevent them from being able to see the forest through the trees. They just are stuck with the things that are in front of them and can't see the bigger picture that's happening in their life. So for me, the process of routinely cultivating as much time just for me, just for my self-care, as much as that felt very woo woo and very selfish at times. When I made peace with that, I realized I was able to make better decisions from what you were talking about. Am I doing this to just get somebody's acceptance? Or am I doing this because I really want to give and support and help and love on them? And ironically, as you were kind of atoning for right there, mentioning to, it was, I got all the validation I wanted after that, but I didn't really care about the validation. I was like, oh, that's kind of like a nice cherry on top, but I would have been fine otherwise. So I would implore people who maybe resonate with kind of the way I look at things is routinely take stock in the people that you are spending the most time with, and not like just physically, though physically can be it, but it's really who is the energies that you're allowing infiltrate your mind, and carve out as much time as humanly possible just for you to sit and be still. That could be a meditative practice, like just sitting and praying or meditating, something of that nature, or journaling. But I think it's important for people to turn off the other media and the other distractions as well, because a lot of people can't actually sit still for like a minute, because often when that is the case, it's probably because they know what's coming up. They will eventually confront the fact, like, you're not really living in alignment with what you actually say you care about, like what your heart really says you care about. And that perpetuates a lot of, I want to say, habits of sickness, but that kind of notion. So that would be those two pieces: evaluate your circle and make time for yourself.
And I think it's something which, as I was listening to you, talk about time for yourself, I think it's something that some people, especially when I had mental health issues, it was like, I'm actually scared, like quite literally scared to do that, right? Because I don't know how my mind's going to play tricks, or I don't know what crap's going to come up, or I don't know what demons are going to come up, or whatever. And, I think it's something which a lot of people can relate to, but I think it's something which, if you're ever going to get a handle on it, to be able to focus on or believe or work on, that business, or work on that fitness goal, or run that marathon, or, whatever it is that you're, let's be honest, making excuses around not doing, right? Like, we can sit here and say, oh, the world's hard, or the economy's bad, or whatever. But actually, in reality, what excuses are you making for not doing that, right? Like, I could sit here and say, well, okay, I don't have a podcast because I haven't made it, or I haven't put the effort in to learn how to do it, I haven't put the effort in to do it, I haven't tried doing it, etc. Or I could say, oh, I can't do that because, right? And then I'm just going to make excuses instead of using it as an opportunity to learn, right? And the crux of what I'm saying there is, sometimes we don't do things because they scare us, right? Or, I want to be a speaker, or I want to write a book, or I want to do some content. We see this all the time with video. I know my business should be doing video, but I can't get over the psychological hurdles of how to overcome the fact I'm on camera, or how do I comfortably talk on a camera or in content, because people are going to see it, right? Really common. I mean, from your own journey, how have you sort of been able to deal with any of those real psychological challenges, right? Because you're fortunate enough where we can speak in a place that we've kind of done it, right? We're towards the end of that journey. There's always learnings to be done, of course, but we've kind of overcome, from what I can tell, the majority of the hurdle, right? In the respect to, we can have this self-care routine, we can have this time among ourselves. I mean, how did you really sort of get to this point?
So there's this concept in coaching, and I don't use the word good coaching often, but what I would say mature coaching is probably a better term, of dosing. And it all comes down to confidence. A lot of people, so you used the word should before. I hear a word like should, good, bad, right, wrong. Those are words of dogma and rigid beliefs. And those words only apply when you use compared to what. So it's in a comparison type of situation. If we drop the comparison notion of all of that, and much like you said before, I want to practice and I understand I'm going to fail, and allow that to be part of the paradigm. Now it speaks to, well, where do you feel most confident starting? So for me, in one example, I couldn't run at that time. My knees were killing me. My right knee tends to have been something in my past that would just act up all the time. I had to work very hard to give myself permission to say, okay, well, I need to move. I want to move because I know that's part of what my process needs to be. I can't run some of these other exercises. I feel too stressed out, too overwhelmed because I'm comparing myself too much to what my former self could do when I was an athlete and had 450 pounds strapped to my back and da 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 da. You know what I'm going to start with? I'm going to start by practicing learning how to enjoy walking my dog. And I would just take my dog for a walk through the park because I could do that. It took little to no motivation. And I had to take my dog to go to the bathroom. So lo and behold, why don't I just make it a thing? And the first time it was, well, I'm just going to do one lap. And then one day, all of a sudden, I'm like, well, I seem to be enjoying this. I guess I'm going to go for 2 laps. And then I started to think, oh, I really don't like how my knee still feels a little catchy while I'm doing this. Okay, well, I'm going to do this X, Y, and I knew all the technical stuff to do to like fix my mobility. So I'm going to do this. Oh, you know what? I've been sleeping a little rickety the past couple of days. I'm going to do that before I go to bed. I'm going to feel good when I go to sleep. And it just started to snowball into this process. But I like this concept of do less better. And within that, when we talk about dosing, start from a place where you would feel the most confident to like, what's that threshold of discomfort? There's going to be, no matter what, there's a gap of unknown. When we put it in the person's court, because a lot of times coaches say, you need to do this. Here's this laundry list of exercises. And I'll give a perfect example. You give that to a mom of 3 who all their kids are ranging from like 2 to 7, and they have a full-time job and they've got their family, their husband, maybe have their in-laws and all that stuff around. They are not like that laundry list of exercises is going to probably look super overwhelming because you just drop that into their plate. And now you have to make an hour of time every single day. That's going to seem daunting and they're going to feel like a massive failure every single day. And some people will just say, oh, willpower, man, you should just overcome it. Sure, you can do that for a couple of days until all the other stresses of life continue to tilt up. And that overwhelm there is what breeds that overwhelming sense of failure. And then people would be like, what's the point? If I'm just going to feel like garbage every single day of this process, I don't care that much. I actually like those Oreos. And you know what? I like sitting on the couch and watching my movies and whatever it is. But giving somebody self permission, say, cool, we're going to start with, can you breathe alone in your room for 5 minutes? And if you fail and you only make it to 3 minutes, cool. Apparently that's your threshold first. How about we just start with 3 minutes? Because it's not that big a difference, 3 minutes to 5 minutes, but it's more about the idea of making space and starting where you can, because with those 3 minutes, it's better than 0. And it also starts to create the space for that person to think more clearly. For me, it was the walking thing where I was. I liked the walking and I already was doing Naked Sunday. Naked Sunday was very uncomfortable for me. Very uncomfortable. A day of just dealing with the negative thoughts in my head. Probably the benefit of that was like my male ego was like, I said I'm going to do this. I'm committing. Let's roll. That was that one. I could the willpower for a few weeks, and then like some of the health changes I made along with it made me feel better. But I had grown to a place where I could handle that threshold at that point in my life. I've been training for 20 some odd years. I've done some really bizarre things to my body. This was my capacity at this time. So for somebody, again, like I said, 3 minutes alone with themselves is the idea of being naked, being honest, being real, and however somebody wants to apply that. This was my way. It has to be contextually appropriate to each individual.
I think that's a really important point, because I think sometimes we get so kind of hemmed up in social media or in what everyone else is doing that we sometimes forget that, my expectations, my goals, my things I can do are not going to be the same to you, they're not going to be to Boris down the road or Bob or Sally or George or whoever it is. But something that I was thinking about as you were mentioning that is a quote that, it's from multiple different places, so I won't bother trying to quote it. But the crux of the point in the quote is change one word when you say, oh, I have to get up, I have to go to work, I have to work out. I get to, right? I get to work out. I get to go to work. I get to drive to work. Whatever it is that you have to do, you get to do it. Because what will happen is your brain's going to listen to that, right? And it's going to say, oh, okay, we get to do this. Great, cool. So we're now excited, or it's a more positive way of phrasing the same thing. And it doesn't have a negative connotation attached to it because we get to do this. I get to have this conversation with you. I get to create this piece of content this afternoon, right? Not, oh, I have to create this piece of content. I don't have to do it. No, I get to. But the thing that will happen eventually once you wake up in a mindset or try to do this in the morning or the night before, when you're going to do something you dislike or something that you feel uncomfortable with, is you will feel this level of gratefulness. And actually you'll feel, especially, well, I mean, I saw it as I was starting to get into speaking, public speaking, which is like one of the most common fears of a human, right? Which is hilarious to find out after you've gone through it. The crux of it was basically like, actually, you're the only person who realizes you went wrong. And as long as you don't like actually freeze and you push through that and you sort of work and you say, actually, yeah, this is okay, right? I get to have this conversation and I'm going to talk about things that I'm passionate about. And I get to be in the position where I can help educate the people in front of me today on this topic in the same way through this medium. We're going to hopefully educate or inspire or etc. some people listening to this podcast to potentially launch their own podcast or potentially, start working out or do that thing or ask that girl or whatever it is. Do those things that make you feel slightly uncomfortable. And I think that it's really powerful in business as well, but also in life, of course. But specifically in business, I'm sure you've had it, I've had it all the time, where you have these moments where it's like, actually, can I ask for like a little bit more money, or can I ask for a little bit more, or can I suggest? And it's like, well, actually, yes, you can, but you need to be willing to take the hit if that client says no, and analyze why that client says no. Okay, is it because the client maybe isn't the right client and maybe they can't actually afford it? Is it because you didn't communicate the value potentially? I mean, how have you sort of worked through some of those, like, I'll use the term as age-old challenges, how to price, how to market, etc., from a business point of view? Because I think as starting out business owners, there's so much to learn, there's so much to do, there's so much to have, that it can be really challenging to know where to start, right? You were talking about overwhelm earlier. That's a very, very strong thing to be overwhelmed by, right? Because someone goes into business because they're passionate about creating videos or whatever it is their business is around, or coaching or so on. But there's so many other things that require the bloodline of the business to exist, sales, marketing, so on. So how did you sort of deal with that overwhelming stage where you can sort of pick apart and actually do the things that you needed to do?
Earlier on, and probably still many times, it's my own pride. I don't like to fail, so that is a skill set I get to lean on. I hate to lose, but that's a me thing. From a perspective of more empathetic and more tactful places for people, I'll use the sales piece because you brought up the pricing. I remember one time I was talking to my friend, my business partner, and we were talking about how to help somebody. And he's like, do you realize, like, if you don't allow them to help you, you're kind of being a hypocrite? And I was like, oh, I know how I feel when I get to help people. I'm denying them that opportunity. And sometimes them giving money is the opportunity to help. But also when it came then to price, I realized that price also has nothing to do with me. It has a little bit beyond some things I'll describe in a second, but the most important thing that helped me with all of this is it was what this other person thinks they're worth. So especially, I think, I fundamentally believe everybody should have a high ticket offering in the coaching space because you're paying for a relationship, and that is intimate, that is meaningful. Especially when people start turning their prices up, it gives somebody the opportunity to ask themselves what they think they're worth. And if I don't even give them that, and I don't think they are, if I don't, by me just saying like, I'm going to discount you, I'm saying I don't think you're worth it. That sends a really weird message to them. And I even had that moment with a client and we were on our sales call, and she's like, "Oh, could you do it?" And I think she asked for like $1,000 less. And I said exactly that. If I told you you're not worth like you versus somebody else is not worth the same, how do you feel? And she just had that look and then signed the check right afterwards. So those are some of the things where when I made it less about me and made it more about them, especially when it comes to a sales conversation. And for the record, coaching is sales, parenting is sales, being in a relationship is sales. People don't like the word sales, but it's a conversation. And great sales is not talking, it is listening. And especially as I've gone out and expanded into the online space of late, I didn't know you, but a few 4 weeks ago, maybe. What I have learned, especially as it's gone international, is people are incredibly lonely. And for you as an individual, I'm speaking to the audience or you too as well, to make time and space for somebody else for them to feel seen and heard is massively valuable. They don't give a damn about any of the knowledge in your head. They don't care about any of that stuff. They care that somebody cares. Will all that other stuff matter later on down the line? Do you have to deliver on a product or a service? Absolutely. But from a fundamental standpoint, if you can't get past that very first barrier of showing somebody that you are intentfully listening and offering solutions based off what you learned about them because you really paid attention and you wanted to truly be of service, that's it. And that was the overwhelm for me. Every time I would feel overwhelmed anxiety, I'm like, oh my God, do I look the right? I would just be like, what do they want? What do they need? Let me clear my own stuff from this. And for me, the when push comes to shove, my desire is to serve. Like me winning, I am cool with waiting longer to win. Because if the other person doesn't win, I can't sustainably win. That's important. And I want us to both win in that. So when I could get my own BS out of the way, because I would come back to this concept, I would just shut that off and just start to ask, how can I be of service today? How can I support? Ask a simple question and just shut my mouth. And that helped quell all my fears because that allowed somebody who was already feeling their own kind of way, locked in their own thoughts, mirroring more or less probably the same damn things I was. I made space for them to feel safe to do that and allowed me the tools to help support them on the next phase in that journey. So for me in business, it goes back to everything I said before. I don't have a system other than the people in front of me. They have the answers. So why don't I just listen to them for what they want if I want to serve them? And that's been enormously gratifying. And it makes me, even for the people that I didn't have the greatest relationship with, like, oh, this wasn't fun, I have a deep sense of gratitude for them because they taught me a lesson about, well, maybe this is not an energy I want in my life, or some other lesson that I just didn't want. And that gratitude allows me to see them with a lot of love and compassion, even beyond that intervention or that interaction. And that, as you go in business, because your business is people, no matter what you do, that to me is really powerful because it didn't cut me off from the next person who really needed my help. I didn't carry resentment and anger and hatred and whatever negative in my gut and my heart to the next person who didn't deserve that. They didn't deserve me barfing my negative emotions and transferring that from somebody else into that space. They deserve a clear shot at having a meaningful, loving, caring relationship, whether it's personal or professional.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it brings up a really important point that I know I've mentioned in previous content, but I'll mention it here again, which is about active listening, right? And it's about truly active listening. It's not like, yeah, okay, I'm listening, but I'm actually writing an email, or yeah, I'm actually listening, but I'm actually on my phone, or yeah, I'm listening, but I'm on TikTok, right? No, you're actually listening. You're hearing what the other person is saying, and you're critically thinking about your answer to make sure that it's adding potential value to that person. And I think the concept of adding value is slightly overused, or maybe overused a bit too much, especially in the social media and especially the coaching space. But it is an important point to be made, because it's not up to you or me to decide what's valuable, right? It's up to the person who's going to receive the information, whether that's for a call or consume the podcast or whatever, however that's distributed. And the important part there is to establish that if someone is seeing value in what you're doing for them, that's all you need, because that's why they are paying you. That's why whether that's through time, energy, or attention, right? And I think sometimes we think too laterally when we say payment, right? Because if someone's giving you time, actually arguably that's a better compliment, or that's better, even if it's thousands and thousands of dollars or pounds, because we only have a certain amount of time, right? Everyone, me and you, only have 24 hours a day, right? So no matter whether you earn 15 times me or I earn 15 times you, the fact that we're able to share this time together is actually more important in that transactional environment, right? Because of the knowledge we can share with each other.
I couldn't agree more. And I think if it helps people looking at money as time, because it took time for somebody to make that money, it's just as much saying that somebody might have just taken 5 years to accumulate that amount of money. That could be a lot. It could be a little bit too. That might look different to somebody, but it's important. Like you said, that time that somebody is sharing of themselves, and especially in a sales room, which it's basically glorified therapy, you're allowing somebody to open up their pain and say, here, I'm going to give you this offering. I want you to ethically and respectfully provide guidance to the next step. Help shepherd me through this moment of discomfort in my life so that I can get that my idea of my life's vacation, help me achieve that. That's really what they're saying, whether it's losing weight, making more money, having more sex, whatever the thing is. But that's really powerful. The fact that they've chosen you, of all people, to decide to share that information with, because they don't have to. They get to, and you get the opportunity to receive that. That's a gift. And to see it as such is really powerful. Even if you're receiving things told to you in a way that you didn't like to hear it. Sometimes that's the harshest truth. It hurts the most, but it's a gift. It's that friend who says, hey man, you got shit in your teeth and you're about to go out on stage. You talk about public speaking. You want the friend who's going to call you and hey, I see that's about to happen. Yeah, I'm telling you, you don't look your best right now. But I know in a few minutes, you're about to go out there and you're going to present to people. I really don't want you to have that moment of embarrassment and have that on camera and whatever, and people talk about it forever, because that would suck. I think that is really important for people to appreciate when somebody chooses to share that of themselves, because it's for you. And it's for you to help them or to build your cause or whatever the thing is that you want.
Yeah, and I think it's something that a lot of people sometimes take for granted, especially people who are looking for external validation, right? To bring it full circle. I think there's so many people who will go, oh, we need to do this or we need to do that because it gives me this good feeling, right? And it's not necessarily from a place of care or appreciation. It's from a place of, yeah, this feels good, right? Because I've got an endorphin hit, or this feels great because we can now post it on social media and I can get a load of likes, or etc. And I think it's quite a dangerous, slippery slope to go down, is to, especially if you are in the mindset of looking for external validation, where you can have that, right? Because otherwise, if you don't, what you'll notice as you don't have or you start having more self-care and you start working on yourself and you focus on yourself more, is those things don't actually give you the endorphin hits that they used to. Because what will end up happening is you're rewiring your brain to trigger the endorphin hits on the what would be, quote unquote, the right things, more than the social media or external stuff, right? And I think this is such an important concept for people to get their head around, because once that happens, you're then not a slave to your moods. You're not a slave to social media platforms, them changing their algorithms. You're not a slave to your friends who, for whatever reason, may be actually, yeah, I don't like the way you are. And there's a huge amount of psychology in that alone about, if you're a piece of competition, then they're going to probably see you as a threat, so they're going to treat you differently, etc. That's a separate conversation entirely. But I'm aware of time, so I think we'll wrap up soon. But the kind of core principle there, and if anyone's going to take anything from this podcast, I hope it's that you're worth giving the time to, right? And I think that giving yourself, if it happens to be on a Sunday and you happen to be naked, okay, cool. If that is an hour journaling, or if that is an hour or even 10 minutes or 5 minutes meditation, or if that is an hour in the gym with your headphones in a day, it's important to build those into your habits and routines. Whether you want to be a global dominating brand, or you want to build the biggest business or whatever, or just be able to serve and be present for your family, right? I think sometimes we glorify why we're creating these habits and these things that we're trying to build ourselves be better by, but I think it can be something as simple as I want to be there for a friend of mine. I want to be present for my father. I want to be present for my mother. I want to be there for my wife, right?
It's usually really, really simple answers when people are truly honest. And the way I love how you brought all those things up, especially since I work with like a lot of women. I believe moms are the heart of the family. So that's why I start there, because if you start with the heart, the rest of the things get taken care of, because everybody comes back to mom when they're feeling a certain kind of way. And that's important to note. Feelings drive behavior. So that's to ground all of that. If you don't have a practice to ground your feelings, you're going to not end up with results probably that you really want. And now stack on the fact that they tend to also be entrepreneurs. Okay, the stressors that are most people will see, I think of it as an iceberg. You probably see some of those icebergs. It's like, oh, all people see are this, but there's all this other stuff underneath. Most people will see, and we'll just talk entrepreneurs for a second, because I'm assuming that's the majority of the people listening. Like, they'll see the stress of the burden that's above the water is their work. Then right below that, they'll have the stress of their family. Gotta make sure the kids are okay. Gotta make sure the significant other's okay. And then below that, what they're not seeing, but they're feeling, is that self-care, that sense of self-worth. And it gets bigger the lower it goes, because only just that little tip of the iceberg comes up. If we can chop off and we can flip the priorities, it makes a lot more space. It makes it a lot easier for those other things to come up. And when I've for long said I want to change the world and all that stuff, that starts at home. And if you are the leader in your home, guess what? It starts with you. And there's a lot of guilt that's wrapped around doing that, because what does it mean to say I'm just going to make time for me and not give it to the kids and not shepherd the kids around to like 95 different activities and It's like, they can figure it out. I'm pretty sure they'd rather have somebody who's present. And not only that, because they took care of their health and well-being, is going to be alive when they're on their wedding day. They're going to be alive when they have that grandkid. They're going to be alive to share in some of those meaningful moments. I brought up my dad almost died a few years back. We last year went on a 2-week vacation together alone in the national parks out west. I got to learn things on that trip that are truly profound. And if I never had that opportunity, I learned a lot about myself in those moments that I think is going to help a lot of other people. Man, if the two of us didn't even have the chance to do that, what would I have missed out on? And then I ask myself the same thing. What have I been exposed to in my life that I hope to pass on not only to my wife, because she knows that I'm prone to lecturing, is how does she get that information? How do my friends get this? How do my children get this? And I'm thinking 20, 30 years down the line of what do I need to be there for? Because I've seen what I've gone through in my life. What are some, and I've coached people as young as 5 and coached people as old as 82 in my life. I've seen the entire gambit of the life cycle. And I've seen a lot of what type of experiences, from divorces to people attempting suicide. Like, people have told me a lot of stuff. What are some of those things that we need to be able to see? And what if we could have a conversation at an intervention point before those moments of critical mass, if you will, come up? Well, it's probably going to have to start with me just taking care of myself. What if I just get my habits and integrate this all into my life and get my life straight for, even if it's, let's say I want to live another 30 years. I'm just going to use that as a number. I want to live another 30 years. It's going to take me 3 years to be at optimal capacity in my life to organize my life in the way that I need to, so I can easily show up, not work hard to show up that way, easily show up at my best, clear-minded, feeling good in my body, presentable, present in the moment. Cool. I have 27 years of optimal performance. That's a lot more opportunities than if I just kind of skated by and was 50% present all the time for the next 30 years of my life, if I even made it that far because of my health choices. What if I only made it 20 years? I missed out on 10 years of life and 20 years of suboptimal clarity and suboptimal impact. It takes that maturity to say, I'm going to hit the pause button. I'm going to reorganize some things. I'm going to make myself the priority. It is not selfish. It is selfless when we actually ask the bigger.
And I think it brings up a really good final point to end on. And, it's about being patient, right? I think so much of our society is designed to have quick turnaround. Everyone wants everything now. Everyone wants to make £1 million tomorrow, etc., $1 million, whatever. They always want to have this like concept of success in their heads, and something that I just want to leave the audience with is when are you taking a breath? When are you gonna just stop and just look at where you've come from and be grateful that you got to do that, but also be proud of where that is, right? Because everyone's had their own journey, whether that's mental health or physical health or whatever, combination of both. And I think it's so important to sometimes just be grateful that you get to do that and you get to do whatever it is. You get to go to your 9 to 5. You get to see your mum. You get to see your dad. You get to see your dog, whatever, because there's going to be a time where you don't get to see them because everyone's time runs out eventually. And I don't want this to be ended on a negative, but hopefully the audience can see this as a positive, because it is, if you're willing to live in gratitude. Right. And for those people who, really like this conversation, really enjoyed it, where can they reach out to continue this conversation with you?
Absolutely. Well, first, I got to say, you're an awesome host. I really just appreciate anybody who takes the time to host conversation. I think this is the way I'm on like this. I have this vision of world inner peace. And I think good, wholesome, like in curious conversation like we're having right now is the start of that kind of stuff. So I just want to share my appreciation for you on that level. If somebody wants to have more of a conversation with me, I'm on all the social media. Just look for at Naked Sunday Podcast. I believe my team just changed that to that. So that's on Instagram. I think that's on Facebook too, TikTok, and on LinkedIn. You can check out the podcast there. You can also follow me. I'm Caleb Nelson. You'll see me on all these other different things. And my website is nakedsunday.coach. You'll just see all bright neon pink and neon blue colors all over the place. So if you get lost, just look for that thing, and you'll probably see me wandering around in some video with my shirt off in my park and just like snuggling with my dog on the couch or whatever. So that's how you'll know you found me. So I'll be there.
Thank you for coming back and joining me, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this episode. If you did, I'd love to hear what you think in the comment section down below. And I'll be back next week with a brand new episode and a brand new guest to have another, hopefully, enlightening conversation. And I'll see you very, very soon.